I want to welcome everybody who's tuned in. My name is Leslie Glustrom. We are so grateful to have you all. And what's so exciting is we have people from all over the state. This meeting is sponsored by a couple of different groups. I work with a lot of different groups on climate change, and but my home group is Clean Energy Action. We're based in Boulder, Colorado. We work at the local, state, and national level to accelerate the transition to the post-fossil fuel world. We have quite a few Clean Energy Action board members and alumni here. The speakers will be introduced by Duncan Gilchrist, who's currently on the board. We have a bunch of great young people on our board. I'm just really excited about what they're bringing to the table as we work on this next big chapter in the transition. I also work with a group that's also based in Boulder called Empower Our Future. And Empower Our Future was, in a sense, a spinoff of Clean Energy Action. We've run 8 elections in Boulder. We didn't want to lose our 501c3. So we created a group that would be not a 501c3, but that could work on our elections. So you'll also, Chris Hoffman is part of Empower Our Future, and we're all part of a lot of different groups. And now I'd like to turn it over, Duncan, if you want to unmute yourself. If you wouldn't mind introducing the speakers. Duncan is one of the board members of Clean Energy Action, and he'll just introduce our 2 speakers for the night, who we are really pleased to have. And there, I don't know if we have our electeds. I was supposed to introduce the elected, so let me just see. Tracy Burnett, yes, thank you, Representative Burnett from East Boulder County is on. We want to thank her so much. She's newly elected, but put on your running shoes if you want to try and keep up with her. She's amazing. She has run over 36 marathons, if I remember correctly, but she's also runs really fast on energy and climate. So just super thrilled to have her. We had hoped to have the mayor of Boulder, Sam Weaver, here. He's very interested. He will be listening to the tape. He's got some family issues going on, his elderly parents. So he sent his regrets. We have Boulder, City of Boulder staff here. Exactly which ones I can't quite manage, but I know Jonathan Cohen was going to be on, our amazing climate and sustainability coordinator, several others. And we had several people from Excel register, and I am really grateful for that, because I think the more we get all this cross communication going, the better. So having said all that, Duncan, if you wouldn't mind introducing the speakers, that would be great.
Absolutely. Just pull up my speaker bios here. Yeah, so we are so excited to welcome Steve Beuning and Bryan Hannigan to join us this evening to talk about Holy Cross's commitment to 100% renewable electricity by 2030. Very, very exciting commitment, and we're grateful for you to both take the time to sort of speak with us today about some of the highlights of that journey. So yeah, a little bit about our speakers this evening. So Steve Beuning is the Vice President of Power Supply and Programs. Before joining Holy Cross Energy, Steve worked at Xcel Energy as the Director of Market Operations, where he served in a variety of programmatic areas, including wholesale electric market design, renewable energy integration, transmission system open access, generation interconnection, congestion management, and congestion hedging. Steve, we're so grateful to have you this evening. And then Bryan Hannigan. Bryan is President and CEO of Holy Cross Energy. Prior to joining Holy Cross in July of 2017, Bryan was an associate laboratory director at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, where he co-founded the U.S. Department of Energy's Grid Modernization Initiative and started up the Energy Systems Integration Facility, a unique distribution grid in a box, enabling utilities, entrepreneurs, and consumers to work together on cleaner, more affordable, and more reliable energy systems. Earlier in his career, Bryan held senior leadership roles at the Electric Power Research Institute, the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So that's a little bit about our speakers this evening. Bryan and Steve, I welcome you both to tell us a little bit about yourselves that we missed there, anything that's relevant that you want our audience to know this evening. And once again, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Duncan. And I appreciate the invitation from Leslie to join you this evening. Steve and I are really excited to share with you our journey to 100% renewable electricity. And what I'd like to do is first set the broader context as to why we think this is an important part of the climate and clean energy transition. What Duncan didn't mention is that I'm actually a PhD climate scientist with a degree in Earth System Science from the University of California at Irvine. And prior to that, some engineering experience and starting my career as a meteorologist. And I'll tell you, the first thing I learned as a meteorology student was whatever prediction you make, you're probably going to be wrong. And I think many of us that think we exactly know how this journey to 100% clean, 100% renewable is going to play out is woe to us that we don't learn the lessons of the weathermen and weatherwomen out there. And so my first point tonight is this is our journey. We have a map, a trail map that we think will take us to the summit. But like any journey along the way, we will invariably make course corrections. We will make changes, and that flexibility of policy, that flexibility of regulation, that flexibility of execution is critical in any strategy to achieve all of our sustainability goals. So as Duncan mentioned, I started at Holy Cross in July of 2017, and my selection was made by our democratically elected board of directors as one of 22 electric cooperatives in the state of Colorado. We are governed not by the Public Utility Commission, but by that group of 7 board members that were democratically elected by the people that we serve. A rural electric cooperative, it's owned by the people that we serve. They elect their representatives choose the management. And the board in 2017 reflected a concerted effort by the community to bring new voices to the table, new perspectives, and really truly represent the voice of the community, which very much was focused on a move to clean and sustainable energy as part of the necessity of maintaining our recreation-based economy, our tourism-based economy. For those of you that don't know Holy Cross, we straddle the I-70 corridor from Vail Pass to Glenwood Springs, and then again down valley from Glenwood Springs down towards Junction on the south side of the highway there. So Rifle, Parachute, Newcastle, the south side of the highway, Battlement Mesa, and then all of the great communities in the Eagle Vale Valley. And in addition, we serve the Roaring Fork Valley, all the way from South Glenwood all the way up into Aspen. So it's a very eclectic mix of members. We have about 60,000 service points, which put us roughly 2% the size of Xcel Energy with 1.2 million electric customers. You can kind of do that math. We're about 2% the size. We do source our wholesale power supply from Xcel Energy through an agreement with them so that as they get greener, so do we. But we're unique in that we have the ability to source energy resources
This is just
from other portions and other providers that are out there. And Steve will talk to you a little bit more about how that's crucial to us making the pivot to clean energy. So our community was very focused on the transition to clean energy. And I think my hiring in 2017 was a critical junction at that point. The board was very clear. We want to make the move. We want to set aspirational goals. We want to go and achieve them. And it was a great opportunity to take my prior work in the laboratory and bring it into the real world in a way that truly benefits all. I will say that electricity is but one part of the climate challenge. As those of you who are students of climate policy well know, there are a couple of key elements in every climate analysis that repeat over and over again, no matter who does it. You first have to employ as much energy efficiency as possible throughout the economy to shrink the size of the climate challenge to a point where it's tangible and you can actually get your arms around it. And then your second step is to decarbonize your electricity supply. And we'll talk a lot about what Holy Cross is doing and frankly, what others are doing around the state to do that in their own electricity supplies as their contribution to the war on climate, if you will, war on climate change at least. The third and really an important element that we won't get into, but I think it bears repeating, is you then need to take that clean electricity and push it into the other sectors of the economy, into the built environment, into the commercial and industrial activities, into transportation through electric vehicles and other approaches. This clean, low carbon, really affordable fuel becomes an ideal substitute for the direct use of fossil fuels in the rest of the economy, where 2/3 of the emissions come from. And that's going to be important for the state to meet its targets. There are going to be some uses, however, where clean electricity isn't going to have the density and the characteristic that you need to get there. So looking for low or no carbon fuels, looking for renewable hydrogen or natural gas, looking for synthetic fuels from biomass. There may be some opportunities for those, and that's kind of the fourth key element. And then the fifth element that I'll put out there is we may still not have enough in terms of our climate mitigation to forestall the worst consequences of climate change that are out there. There's a lot that, as I'll tell you as a climate scientist, there's a lot that's in the queue in terms of climate related impacts. And so focusing our society on making investments that not only build a sustainable energy system, but also allow that sustainable energy system to be more resilient to wildfires and floods and snowstorms and other events that are coming our way. In the 3 years that I've been Holy Cross as CEO, we've had 2 major wildfires and a pandemic. I don't think it's going to get any easier anytime soon, and yet we still need to make this journey ahead of us, even with the wind and the snow and all that blowing in our face. So with that preface, I want to really focus in on our journey to 100% renewables, because it is the first, but it's a critical step to our collective journey to a sustainable climate as we move forward. And so let's see if I can advance the slides here. Again, Holy Cross Energy is one of 22 electric cooperatives here in the state of Colorado. We're founded, like most cooperatives, in 1939 as part of the New Deal. We've got 44,000 members, 60,000 electric delivery points. And as you can see there, in 2020, 44% of our power supply came from wind, from solar, from biomass and hydro, as well as the innovative coal mine methane recovery project from a closed coal mine south of our service territory in Somerset. As an electric cooperative, it's more than just keeping the lights on and keeping the rates low. We focus on giving back to our communities. We focus on community development, on job creation, on being part of the community fabric. And I think one of the keys to any utility going forward is to embrace that ethos, to not hide behind, well, that's the way we've always done it, or, well, our policies and procedures don't allow that, to really sit down with your consumer base. And I know Xcel Energy shares this as well. You sit down with your consumer base, you engage them, you think about what it is that they want to do and how you can enable that, and really give your customers what they want before somebody else does. And I think that's the key to success, not only as a utility, but in business as well. Within the last several months, we have finalized a new strategic plan that was the result of a multi-year voyage of discovery, both with our members and internally, to think about the kind of utility that we want to be when we grow up. This strategic plan is guiding the evolution of our company over the next decade. And in addition to elements around affordability and safety and the reliability of our system and being a good community partner and being a great place to work, one of the key elements that was really paramount in moving forward with this strategy was to obtain a 100% carbon-free power supply by 2030. And moreover, to go the rest of the distance and look at our entire operations and become carbon neutral across the enterprise by 2035. This is our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We are only 1 million metric tons in the baseline, so we're not going to solve the problem by ourselves. But as I mentioned earlier, if we can get carbon-free electricity,
get it on that one,
and push that through the rest of the economy, we can empower others to make their own climate commitments and to join the challenge to address this generational issue. So our journey to 100 includes a number of really key specific steps here that will allow us to achieve our vision of leading the responsible transition to a clean energy future. The word transition, I think, is really important to pause and think about. This isn't going to happen overnight. We've built an electric system and all of the infrastructure around it over the last century, and it's served us very well. And I think it's appropriate to celebrate that, but at the same time to recognize that that infrastructure can't carry us into the next century in the same sustainable way that we would like to see. So we have to transition from those old investments to new investments in a way that doesn't sacrifice affordability, that doesn't sacrifice safety, that doesn't sacrifice reliability, just for the sake of clean energy. Because what we know from doing surveys and focus groups with our consumers, and what we hear time and time again from consumers all around the world, is that first they expect us to keep the lights on, because that's our job. That's kind of our one job, you know. Then they expect, in doing that, they also expect us to do it safely, because nobody wants to partner with a company that's unsafe. Nobody wants to partner with a company that puts you in harm's way. And so we have to keep the lights on and we have to do it safely. There's no argument on that. Then affordability is a big deal, because when we asked our consumers, how much more would you pay to move to clean energy? About half of our consumers said, I will move to clean energy. I don't care what it costs, make it happen. The other half said, you know, I'd really like clean energy, but what I really like are low bills. And so if you can find a way to transition to clean energy without impacting affordability, then you make everybody happy. And as a CEO, that's the gig that I'm in. I want to make everybody happy and deliver what they want before somebody else does. So our strategy has a few key elements. We're going to continue to use energy efficiency for the reasons I described earlier. It helps us size the problem down over time that we're trying to fix. As Steve will talk about in a few moments, we're going to incorporate new, clean, and dispatchable resources into our power supply mix. Our product needs to be more clean so that folks can use it to meet their own climate objectives going forward. And we get a double bang for the buck in terms of reducing emissions into the atmosphere. Because we are a co-op, we also want to focus on developing resources in our community. Now, this is more important when you think about the mountains and the valleys of Western Colorado that we serve, and how in many cases our transmission line is one way in, one way out. During the last 2 fires, we've had instances where large swaths of our population have been at risk. In some cases, one burning pole away from being in the dark for a week or more. So if we're going to develop clean energy resources, why not do the bonus points and develop them in your community to the extent that they're possible? So you can see some of the projects that we have there. We also know that consumers want the option to put clean energy on their homes and in their businesses. And so we want to support that through distributed energy resources, a commitment there to support at least 2 megawatt per year of new rooftop solar system. To put that in perspective, our summer peak on our entire system is only 150 megawatts. So while 2 megawatts doesn't sound like a whole lot for XL, it sure is a whole lot for us. And by the way, last year in 2020, we did over 4. So our community clearly wants solar as part of the mix, and distributed solar at that. And then again, we get a bigger bang for the buck from a societal standpoint if we can encourage the expanded use of electricity for transportation to replace oil and gasoline, for building heating and cooling, heating especially in our service territory with the winter season, and industrial processes. Not only does that help us find home for that clean energy, but a lot of those uses are more flexible so that we can not only control the supply to meet the demand, now we can control the demand or influence it to meet the supply. And that allows us to create that balance at all times and at all places that is so important to reliability, where supply and demand are constantly changing, but doing it in concert together to keep the lights on, to keep the rates low, and to make sure that the power is clean. So what have we done to date? Well, we started with an initial plan we called 70-70-30 in the fall of 2018. We announced that we were going to take on a 70% clean energy goal by 2030. And we committed to do that with no additional increase in the cost of power supply. And you can see the methods that we used on the right there, which are the methods we're going to use now to go the rest of the way, to 100%. We're going to increase our purchases of renewable energy from projects developed in Colorado and elsewhere in the region. We're going to reduce our dependence on coal-fired electricity. We are co-owner of the Comanche 3 power plant, and we'll be very interested to see what that plant's future is as it's debated before the Public Utility Commission here over the next year plus as part of Xcel Energy's integrated resource planning. Mentioned earlier, we're improving the efficiency of our network and the buildings and the vehicles and the businesses connected to it. We have a 2% adder to our utility bills that is invested in what we call a We Care fund that is put back into the community through efficiency rebates, not just lights and thermostats, also process improvements and upgrades, incentives for EV charging, support for battery storage, for a variety of programs that create the flexibility and the efficiency on our network that we're going to need on our way to 100%. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to invest in new local renewable energy resources directly connected to our grid and to our homes and businesses. Rooftop solar, community solar, the projects that we've just acquired from the Clean Energy Collective to maintain them in our community, to continue to provide value to our members. 5 megawatts of utility scale solar just outside the Aspen airport in Pitkin County. If you know Pitkin County, you know that permitting that was no mean feat, but a big justification for that was Pitkin's own climate goals and the desire to have local resources to help improve the resilience of energy supply in that portion of the Roaring Fork Valley. So lots of new great things coming online over the next couple of years, such that by the end of 2022, we will have met that initial 2030 goal of the 70% target, 8 years early. And that's a full credit to Steve and his team, and frankly, to the technologies and the costs of the cleaner energy resources that are out there that make it possible to achieve our greenhouse gas goals in a way that is not just environmentally sustainable, but financially sustainable as well. So kind of putting this all in perspective, here was our energy mix in 2005, back in the day where utilities weren't really thinking about greenhouse gases as front of mind. And you can see we're over 50% coal and 28% gas with a resource mix largely coming from the regional bulk power grid. We had a few projects, but we were at 7% clean and renewable in 2005. In 2018, we had taken some actions through purchase of energy from wind energy resources, from development of a biomass facility in the town of Gypsum that we had on contract to provide clean and sustainable energy there. Through the mine methane project I described earlier, we were up to 39%, but still a lot of focus on coal as the mainstay of our energy mix. And when we get to 2024, so a couple of years beyond where I was highlighting earlier, we won't be at 70%, we'll be at 84% or thereabouts if all of our projects that are planned and on the drawing boards come to materialize. And that obviously reduces our carbon footprint, but it also contributes to a meaningful reduction in emissions across the area that we serve. A lot of wind, a lot of solar, but still some biomass, some hydro, and some other resources. And obviously beyond 2024, we take that last steep pitch to the summit of 100%. So where do we go from here? We've got great momentum. We're looking forward to being one of the cleanest utilities in the country. We're learning and listening and understanding from others that are on the journey with us to make sure that we don't go the wrong way or fall into a crevice or all the other climbing, hiking, mountaineering metaphors you want to put in there. And I'm really excited that our efforts are not alone. Just in the state of, if you look at Black Hills and Tri-State and Xcel and Platte River Power and Colorado Springs Utilities, the electric sector in this state is moving forward on the energy transition. Now, you may argue it's not fast enough, it's not big enough, but it's moving forward, and there's been a lot of momentum in the last couple of years. And I think what's needed now is to ask ourselves, if we can clean this electricity supply here in Colorado, how can we take it now and put it into buildings like we did with the picture here, our Basalt Vista affordable housing project behind the Basalt High School, all electric, net zero, affordable housing for teachers and support workers in our local economy. This is in a place where the home price is $750,000. A teacher's salary of 50 or 60 grand a year just doesn't cut it. So one of the ways that we can help retain great talent in our community is to give them a place to live that is affordable, not just to buy, but to live in. If they can have solar on the rooftop that's creating their energy supply, and that building is interacting with the grid and gaining revenue for the services that it provides to help keep the lights on and help us integrate new clean energy resources, that helps the consumer, but that also helps the utility, that helps the community. So how do we do more of this with our building codes and standards, with our EV charging infrastructure and our school buses and our transit buses? This is kind of the next chapter of the climate challenge. And my hope is that active communities for climate action like Boulder, like Edwards, like Vail, like Aspen, can really start to think about the rest of the problem now and support the great work that Holy Cross, Excel, and others are doing on the electric side. So with that, I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to turn it over to the real genius of the operations, Steve Boyning, who's our VP of Power Supply and Programs. When Steve arrived from Xcel Energy, we were thrilled to bring him on board. He's a noted expert, not only on resource planning and market operations, but kind of all the issues around the West as it's transitioning to clean energy. And Steve is really the architect of writing this next chapter, the 2022 to 2030, that final ascent to the summit of 100% clean energy. So Steve, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. I sincerely appreciate the kind words. If my head swells up too big to be captured by the camera, please accept my apologies. No, thanks. Brian, I want to say well done on your presentation materials. That's a complete presentation in itself. And I want to thank you for the leadership you brought to Holy Cross and for taking us down the road on this journey. So very nice. Can we go to the next slide, please? Just to start this introduction, I want to cue up what we've done in the last year because I expect that soon, like within a matter of a few months, we'll be providing detailed information on what's described here in this slide. But just over a year ago, in December of 2019, we issued an all-source RFP for clean and renewable resources. We got a lot of offers, 51, over 500 megawatts of supply. If you remember Brian's comment, our summer peak demand is only 150, 160 megawatts. And what we saw on the projects that we shortlisted told us that if we exercised our option, and I should comment here that as a distribution utility with a wholesale supplier contract, we do have unusual contract flexibility that gives us options to go out and source alternative suppliers from our default wholesale supplier, which is Xcel Energy. That's unusual in the industry, and it's something that we're taking advantage of in order to get to 100% sooner than we would have otherwise riding on anybody else's coattails in the process. But the interesting thing about our shortlist, going back to this slide here, is that it showed us that we could substitute these local and distributed power supply resources that are renewable in a way that would actually reduce our power supply costs compared to status quo. And I haven't been able to check all of the messages in the chat box up to this point, but I did see one question like, why wouldn't we just go with Xcel's renewable developments? I hope that answers that question. So in 2020, we did analysis of these offers, because there are trade-offs in the whole mix. There's a lot of permutations to work through. We started negotiations with our shortlisted suppliers, and we're at a stage here where we're in finalization of all of those contracts. We're waiting on an understanding from Public Service Colorado on some of the bulk system impacts of these resources in order to understand the full picture of the costs of supply. But from our side, it looks like we will close, or that we expect to close on contracts that would add another 80 megawatts of renewable supply for the Holy Cross system. That would include some regional, some hydro from down the road, and then a lot of solar and storage combined projects on our system. I did see there was a question in the chat box, what do you do with solar on a cloudy day? It's interesting with the 135 megawatts of renewable resources that we added back in 2019 through signed contracts. That was a 100 megawatt wind farm, 35 megawatts of solar. And with those resources producing on a variable output basis, that challenge of matching generation to load at all times is important. But what we see on a resource like wind is the energy production costs are low enough. It's better to oversize the wind compared to your needs and deal with the oversupply through curtailments of output so that you're managing your resource downward instead of upward. And I think we'll see more of that. We think that by the time these other resources are added, we could have around 40 gigawatt hours a year of renewable supply on our system that we will be looking to either pass through to our members on a please use basis. For example, if you have an electric vehicle, we'll give you a free electric charger if you consent to let us time your charging overnight to those hours when the wind farm is blowing strong and our load isn't otherwise there. And that's an example of taking the programs side of power supply and programs and help increase demand flexibility through these new types of uses of electricity in a way that balances our supply and demand. Going back to our 80 megawatts that we think we might add, I'd point out that these were all solar plus battery storage projects where the combined facility is still a qualifying facility under PURPA, but where we would have 80 megawatts of renewable supply, we would also bring 160 megawatt hours of battery energy storage. That will help us optimize that oversupply from renewables when our load is light. We can put that energy into the battery and to withdraw that stored energy from the batteries during hours when the solar production, for example, is covered by snow. So if we can attain the construction of all of this additional renewable supply, then by the end of 2023, we project that Holy Cross would be at about 85% annual energy from renewables, kind of that next step up the mountain path. Brian, could you go to the next slide, please? But I think that's where it really starts getting challenging because we will have oversupply conditions, which can reduce the economic viability of increments of supply beyond that. And we have a lot of other technical issues. How do we change our planning on our distribution system to reflect the fact that there's increasing distributed supply and that our distribution wires are no longer just one-way deliveries, but two-way highways that can have traffic in both directions, customers using, resources supplying, and that changes the way we plan our distribution system, and we'll address challenges with that. We've also started down the road on modifying our electric retail rates for our customers and the programs that we offer them. Right now, for example, we're piloting a retail program that we hope we can roll out later in 2021, where we would help the member finance the installation of a Tesla battery in their household, a Powerwall. And most of the time, that member doesn't need to use that battery. The value to the member in most cases is that they no longer see the lights go out because there was a problem on the Holy Cross or on the bulk electric system that caused an outage. In one of our pilot examples, we've already avoided, I can't remember the number, Brian, maybe you can help me recall, but it's, I think, 28 different electric outages at the residence site by virtue of the Powerwall making an uninterruptible power system for the household. And so that's an example of a program where we can help bring an economic and affordable resilience solution to our members. And during those times when the battery isn't needed for backup supply, we'd always keep a certain level of energy in the gas tank for them. But during the blue sky days, we could use that to inject our oversupply from wind and solar and withdraw from storage to manage the coincident peak on our system, which is a big driver of our power supply costs. And we'd share those benefits that the utility would obtain with the member in exchange for their participation in the program. You know, a third category of the techie details on getting ready to go to 100% is in this area of wholesale electricity market development. Some of you may be aware that next Monday, February 1st, a regional electricity market will begin operation in parts of Colorado, parts that are served by Western Area Power Administration and tri-state cooperative members. And Holy Cross shares the view with utilities who have understood that wholesale electric markets can increase the flexibility. It makes it more efficient for utilities to supply energy to one another. And as a result, a wholesale market for electricity is an important development in managing that variability of wind and solar supply. Some people would call it renewable resource integration benefits from wholesale markets. And then another last category of technical details in preparations for getting to 100 are in this category that I'll characterize as ancillary services. They're technical support provided from generation and demand response resources that are necessary in order for the grid to stay energized and do its basic functions. Things like balancing, like backup supply, like an interesting geeky detail called system inertia. Let me talk about that for a second, just because I'm a geek and I like talking about that sort of thing. You know, today's, or I should say the old fossil fuel fleet addressed the mismatch between generation and load because the thermal generators were basically pushing magnets around in a circle. They were spinning a generator rotor, and those magnets were magnetically coupled to the grid. When there was a change in electric demand on the grid, that caused the magnets to either speed up or slow down, and that affected system frequency. And so you had this physical connection between thermal production resources and electric grid frequency that actually created support for changes in grid frequency or helped mitigate swings in grid frequency when there were changes in the balance between supply and demand. As we go to more renewables, these generating resources, wind and solar, are connected to the grid through a computer-controlled device called an inverter. And an inverter in today's prevailing designs doesn't by itself provide this inertial response to support the grid frequency when there are changes in the load and generation balance. But what we're seeing is that the new wave of inverter technologies that are being deployed in the grid called grid forming inverters and inverters that have the ability to provide through their computer controls something called synthetic inertia. We think these will be the methods in the future that we will use as these thermal resources are largely retired to ensure that we maintain reliable supply even with the variability in generation and load. We don't know all the answers yet, but I like the analogy that it's like your car headlights. When you're driving at night, you can't see all the way to your destination, but using your headlights, you can see far enough ahead, you can make it to your destination. And from what we're aware of right now through industry collaborative groups that address issues around renewable integration, we're pretty confident that these challenges can be met. Bryan, can we go to the next slide, please? So in this evaluation of our evolution, you know, it's not just about going out and signing contracts for shiny new objects. There's a lot of contractual challenges that exist as well. Holy Cross does still own 8% of the Comanche 3 generating plant. That makes us a minority partner. We don't have the right to say what happens to that plant. The majority owner, Public Service Colorado, Xcel Energy, will make those determinations through their resource planning process that begins at the Public Utilities Commission this spring. Our ownership share is about 60 megawatts. What we've done is we've sold the energy output from our share of production to another utility. And that doesn't change the carbon emissions that go out the smokestack. We recognize that, and that's part of our challenge in the long term. It does help us get room to replace that energy production with other resources as we're evolving our generation portfolio. So some of the other technical details we have to work on in our transition are issues around grid access. It hasn't all been smooth sailing as we've tried to develop our bulk system connected wind farm and a bulk system connected solar field. And some of that stuff will play out over time. We hope and believe that those issues will be resolved this calendar year, and that will help clear or at least clarify some of the obstacles that could exist in our road to 100%. So I think I've talked about some of these technical aspects in addressing high renewable supply. You've seen them here on the slide for a while. Bryan, can we go on to the next slide, please? I guess I've also mentioned that the SPP energy imbalance market begins operations in a part of Colorado next Monday. The Public Service Colorado balancing area, which includes utilities like Holy Cross, Colorado Springs Utilities, Platte River Power, Black Hills Colorado Electric, PSCO has selected its participation in the CAISO's energy imbalance market, which is an alternative wholesale electricity market to the one operated by SPP. That regional energy market, which does encompass a lot of the other states, the majority of the electric demand in the Western interconnection, is scheduled to begin operations in the PSCO footprint in the spring of 2022. Much of the CAISO EIM footprint, by the way, I should clarify, is already operating. Both of these just address issues about optimizing the existing supply resources that are connected to the grid. It helps balance generation and load, but it doesn't address or make more efficient the amount of resources that we have to connect in order to maintain reliability. And it doesn't address independent access to grid and more efficient grid access techniques. So we think to get to those additional benefits, the provision of services through a regional transmission organization, as those are defined under FERC regulation, will be important. They consolidate access to the grid, they consolidate and simplify the rates for use of the grid. They remove an obstacle, or I should say a thing that creates different business practices across the grid footprint by consolidating utility balancing areas into a single balancing area. So you no longer have to address different levels of operating standards as you go from point to point across the grid. They address resource adequacy, I think I mentioned that. And then RTO addresses bulk grid planning and expansion in a way that's coordinated so as to avoid duplicate investment in transmission facilities by multiple transmission owners.
Steve, this is Leslie, and I'm going to use my moderator prerogative here. I happen to know that you are a major expert and have been thinking about these things for a super long time, and quite a few people on our call on the meeting kind of already know this, but I want to make sure for those that don't, I'm going to just jump in for a couple minutes and then ask you a question to make sure that we haven't lost a third or a half of the audience at this point. On the left-hand side of your slide, I'm going to do it in kind of layperson's terms, and then you can fix it for me. On the left-hand side, we have something that is often referred to as an energy imbalance market, so that you can kind of trade with other utilities when you've got extra wind or extra solar. But one of the issues in Colorado is we have some of our Colorado utilities looking east to Southwest Power Pool, which is SPP, and we have some of our utilities like XL looking west to CAISO, which is California's, in this case, energy imbalance market. And then on the right side of your slide, you're talking about sort of what I think of as the additional benefits which from a lot of our reading, we can know this, they're very significant, of getting into, in a sense, I wonder what the right layperson way to say it is, but kind of into a more involved arrangement, but ultimately with much bigger benefits known as RTOs. So that's my layperson summary of what you just said. You can fix anything. And then if you want to, you know, Holy Cross is here. I know this is delicate maneuvering, but you want to look into your crystal ball, use your headlights, tell us how, are we going to have half of our state going east and half going west? Are we going to get to an RTO? Maybe you don't want to say, you can say, you can claim the Fifth Amendment if you want to.
Okay, Leslie, thank you so much. I appreciate you stopping me because I was on a geek roll and you reined me in. So thank you for that. You know, I love this stuff, so I'm always happy to talk about it in more detail than anybody else wants to hear. With respect to your summary, totally accurate. You nailed it. So I have no corrections to offer on that. And thank you for putting it into a better description. In terms of your question, asking me to speculate, let me first address that in two parts. With respect to the EIMs, I think you will see two separate EIMs operating in Colorado. I just think there's momentum by both of these footprints towards development, and that's probably unlikely to stop. I have heard comments by some parties that indicate flexibility with respect, you know, making this commitment today to an imbalanced market is not a permanent commitment. Both of these have relatively easy exit options compared to a full RTO, which I'll grant to any skeptics, are much more difficult to exit because by virtue of taking on these broader duties in an RTO, there are financial commitments made in cooperation with other parties that make exit more difficult.
Okay.
And in terms of speculating on when an RTO might start up, I heard executives at Xcel Energy and Tri-State today speculate an RTO startup is probably pretty unlikely to occur before 2025. And those parties are really in the driver's seat on that type of policy type decision. We're what's called a transmission dependent utility, and we rely on these bulk system providers like Xcel and Tri-State and WAPA to make those arrangements for us in large part. Sorry for going on so long, you guys. I probably am running over on my time. Brian, can we go to the next slide, please?
It's great, Steve, and that was extremely helpful on many levels. So thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. So just in terms of our short-term next steps, Holy Cross expects by the end of this year to complete a resource plan and discuss each of these techie next step areas and resource needs that we might have to attain the 100% renewable supply by 2030. You know, we'll be taking into account load growth, local potential, integrating our demand as part of the response to balanced supply, changes that might be coming on resource adequacy and all these things we've talked about. And one thing Brian and I would both like to point out is that we do expect in 2021 now to file with the Air Quality Control Commission and the PUC in Colorado a voluntary clean energy plan that will address what our projections for the trajectory of our CO2 emissions as part of our portfolio. Next slide, please, Brian. I think Brian laid this out for you. You know, we have a lot of support for this renewable energy transition from our communities and for a healthy environment. You know, we recognize we have some unique characteristics given our wholesale supply and transmission contracts with PSCO and other parties that give us a chance to take steps forward that maybe not all distribution co-ops or other utilities would be able to take. But we do hope that what we can help demonstrate to anybody who's willing to take this journey is that it's doable. It can be managed in a way that preserves those key values that Brian talked about: safety, reliability, affordability, and at the same time we can address sustainability. So I think that takes us to the end of our comments. Bryan, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it does indeed. And we are very conscious and mindful of our ability to model the way for other utilities to embrace and adopt to the extent that it suits their local circumstances. There's a saying in co-op nation that when you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op, right? All 900 of us are slightly different in how our heart beats and who we serve and where we go. But this journey of 100% to 100% clean energy for us is really but the first step in a larger journey that our society needs to take. And as they say, every journey begins with the first step. Our first step may be only 1 million out of the 60 billion tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that go into the atmosphere. But every million tons is important. And if we can do our part in a way that others can replicate and scale, then we've done more than our fair share to address this massive challenge for this and for future generations. So Leslie, thank you for giving Steve and I the soapbox for a long duration supply of energy, clean, and hopefully some excitement. And we'll look forward to everybody's questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I know I'm a woman and all that, but I got tears in my eyes. I really appreciate it. I loved the headlight analogy, which is we don't exactly know how we're going to get from 92 to 96 or 96 to 100%. But I haven't heard that before, Steve's analogy that you have headlights to see far enough ahead. If you just keep not overdriving your headlights, you can get where you're going, and maybe you're only going to get to 98, but obviously you're determined to get a long ways. So now I turn over the hardest part of this meeting to some combination. Bryan, I don't know if you've seen questions you really would like to answer. We've got Ron Lair's question, but we also have Chris Hoffman, and Chris has unmuted himself. He's wickedly good at this stuff. So if you'd like Chris to just generate the questions for you, he will set them up for you. So I don't know, Bryan, if you have a
I think that'll work, Leslie. Why don't we have Chris fire away? I'm also going to stop the share so that those of you with limited screens like mine can see more than one person at a time. And that'll also allow us to take a look at the chat. So yeah, we appreciate it. Chris, fire away.
Okay. So once again, Steve and Bryan, thank you very much. This was extremely helpful and enlightening. And we do have a lot of questions. We've got a lot of great questions. The first one, one participant said, love what you're saying, Bryan, but you also kept saying the utility needs to deliver, quote, before someone else does. What do you see as the role of free market competition in getting the best results?
It's a great question. I will be one of the first ones to tell you that in every market where you have competition, you drive down prices, you drive up performance. And if you live in the utility industry today and you don't think you already have competition, even if you're regulated, even if you've got monopoly territories, you are mistaken. We have competition from emerging technologies. We have competition from a dramatically declining cost for solar panels and for wind turbines and for merchant energy on the bulk power system, as well as battery storage behind the meter and new efficiency. Something that I don't think many people appreciate about utilities is that we have built a business model that depends vitally on continued growth in consumption of electricity. It was something that we saw steadily from the 1930s on to the present. And we use that to basically offset that growth in revenue offsets the growth in costs with labor and materials. And so, ideally all that offsets and you keep your rates stable. In Holy Cross's territory, because of where we are, our native load growth is maybe 0.25% per year with the limited land space, the high cost of living. So we don't have the advantage that other fast growing utilities have if we want to keep our rates stable. And so to do that, we've got to continue to innovate. We've got to find efficiencies in our power supply. We've got to become leaner as an organization. And if we don't do the job of serving our members, then at some point, they're going to decide to get their energy services from someplace else, from a solar provider, from a third-party aggregator, from another market entrant. I'm a resident in California. I used to own property there. I used to be a member of a CCA. There are a number of opportunities for municipalization, for investor-owned utilities to come in and buy out a poorly functioning cooperative or muni or even another IOU. So competition exists all around us, and the best way to win at competition is to win, to provide low-cost power safely, affordably, reliably, and with all the sustainability attributes that our community wants.
Great, thanks. Here's another one. I think you've touched on this already, but it's does Holy Cross still own 8% of Comanche 3, and how will you get out of that or convince Excel to retire it by 2030?
Good question. If anybody's got any answers, Steve and I are listening.
I'll raise my hand. No, I'm just kidding.
In all honesty, we continue to own 8% of that. Very efficient, relatively clean as far as coal plants go. It's been in service since 2012. We would expect it normally in a non-climate world to be in service for decades to come. But I think all of us with our clean energy goals, ourselves, IREA, PSCO, Xcel Energy, we got to figure out what to do with this and how to transition to the clean energy future with that asset in a way that doesn't sacrifice all the other stuff we were talking about: reliability, safety, affordability.
Great,
Well,
thanks. Yeah.
Chris, I'm going to jump in with my moderator prerogative again. When we've looked at Excel's system, as we dealt with the Cherokee coal plants, which were in downtown Denver, the largest, which was known as Cherokee 4, to call it Denver Unit 4, it was a coal plant. Then Excel stopped burning coal for a while, but kept it available on natural gas, fossil methane, whatever you want to call it. Do you see if that were proposed? Do you have a thought about that? Is that doable? Is that a thought? And if you don't want to answer any of these questions, we get that. You can just say, I don't know.
I'm gonna let Steve take a whack at that one. I know we've had our conversations, so.
Sure. I mean, like I suppose Bryan has mentioned, PSCO drives the bus with respect to those decisions, and the evaluation is ultimately theirs. And I appreciate your example of the Cherokee units. They did two things at Cherokee. One was convert a coal-fired boiler to combust natural gas to make steam. So they still have a generating plant there, but instead of coal at a higher heat rate, they have gas at a lower heat rate. So they've reduced emissions there, even though they've kept what looks like a coal plant from the outside. And then on one of the other units, they did something else that in the technical world may be a good use for these large spinning magnets. They converted the generator rotor to no longer accept a steam push to make it spin. Instead, they let the grid electrical frequency keep that 30-ton rotor spinning all the time. And those magnets spinning to create a 60-cycle connection provide an inertial response. That type of operation is called a synchronous condenser. So those are two examples of how a coal plant use can be converted, either still make steam and produce energy, but with a better heat rate through a different type of fuel, or don't make energy anymore, but help with grid stability issues as a synchronous condenser. There's a third alternative for coal plants that I've heard people discuss, and I'm not necessarily advocating, but I'm just putting it on the menu of options. And that is some type of a strategic electricity reserve. Mothball it, keep it available. If we have, a volcanic eruption that shorts out every solar panel in 15 states, and we have reliability problems, and fire it back up. Maybe it takes a week, but that'd be better than. I don't know. I think weird thoughts outside the box. So I'm sorry if that's crazy, but
no, it was great. Those were super helpful. And to be honest, I wanted to get those out there. Dennis Hoffman is the one who asked those questions, and he's got a long interest in this, been really engaged. So I think he probably appreciates a little more depth here. So thank you, Chris, for letting me jump in there.
Here's a question about the overcapacity, and what does overcapacity do to costs, and who buys the excess at what price? And I think you touched on that a little bit, but I think people would like more information about.
Sure. Yeah. Brian, can I take that one?
Go for it.
We think with the contracts that we've signed in 2019 for roughly 135 megawatts, kind of that first tranche of renewables, that'll get us up above 70%. We expect that compared to our load will give us roughly 10 gigawatt hours a year of oversupply. And when we evaluated the economic benefits of those projects, we assumed we curtailed the output to balance generation and load. So we've taken into account the potential economic consequences of not producing from a free fuel source that was available. But one of the things that we're doing at Holy Cross is looking on the program side. I mentioned we're trying, we give our members a free charger if they give us the option to schedule when their car charges overnight. Our average member comes home from work, plugs in their car for 11 hours, and their refresh on their car is done in a 2-hour period. And so what we've seen from our population of customers is that we can manage that 2-hour charging interval overnight in a way that takes best advantage of available renewable supply. And the member still sees a full battery on their car when they come out of their house in the morning. So that's an example.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Here's another question, more political. What legislation does Holy Cross hope to see emerge from the General Assembly this year beyond the RTO bill and the Wildfire bill that would most benefit your drive to achieve 100% by 2030?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, the two that you mentioned, the RTO bill and the Wildfire bill, are both of vital importance to Holy Cross, and I would put them at the top of our legislative agenda. The obvious reason being an RTO helps us partner regionally to achieve our renewable energy goals, both in terms of managing our oversupply, but also securing additional resources. And the Wildfire bill is absolutely critically important because, as we've seen in California and other states throughout the West, the risk of wildfires is increasing dramatically. We need to get investments made in vegetation management, in fire risk mitigation, changing out our fusing, new protection schemes, a whole nother time for discussion on the things that we're doing over there to make our system more resilient to fire and to also prevent it from starting fires. But one bad fire, taking out a couple of homes in the wrong portion of the Holy Cross territory, puts us into bankruptcy. And that impacts our ability to serve our communities, obviously. And so having some pooling of the risk in this changing climate is vitally critical to us. The one that I would put out there, and we're not necessarily 100% in support of this as it's written yet, but we're working with the authors, is a real strong push towards building electrification. There's a bill that's being promoted that would have large buildings benchmarking and sharing data on their building performance. That will inevitably unearth some opportunities for energy efficiency improvements. But I kind of would like to see it go beyond that, because what we need more than buildings that use less are buildings that use better. Steve pointed out, we're going to have times where we're going to be telling people, just charge all you like, just use the energy, and batteries are one way to do storage, but the thermal mass of these buildings that we operate and live in is also another way to chew up energy at times when it's in oversupply and not chew it up later on when everybody's at the peak. So I'd like to see some building energy efficiency legislation that also includes building demand response. I think that would be really valuable for all of us going forward.
Great, thanks. I'm glad you're in conversation with the bill author for that. Does integrating more renewables in system operations get cheaper and easier as you add more, since variations in output are spread across more geographic area and are not correlated?
Yeah, I'll get that one, Steve. Yes and no. If you have access to a large geographic footprint in the context of an RTO or a large balancing area, then yes, you can use geographic diversity to help balance your bulk system renewables. But when you start getting to 80, 90%, if you can think of the utilities, energy demand as a really spiky you know, group of mountains with lots of peaks and valleys in it, and you're filling up with blocks. At some point you get to the top of the curve where there's only little itty bitty spikes that's left. And you're not going to be able to go out and solve those spikes with big chunks of bulk connected renewables. That's where you need the fine-grained response of small renewables, but also flexibility on the demand side. You can only take the bulk system so far. That last 10 or 20%, you've got to really focus on little bits and pieces to fit into those slots to make sure you're balancing 100% of the time. So it does become a little bit more complicated at the end, is what I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
Chris, could I, if Chris and I had ever done this before, we would have a better system. But Chris, I wondered if I could just jump in. We have a question from someone in Boulder, and I think it's a really important question to get answered. Holy Cross is served by Xcel, which is working to decarbonize our electricity. Boulder is served by Xcel. We want to decarbonize our electricity. We're working with Xcel now in this partnership that's getting set up. And the question is, I'm pretty sure it's from Patrick Murphy. To summarize it, why don't you just let Xcel lead the way and then just try to fill in that last 20%? Wouldn't that be a better solution? His full question is in the chat. That's a summary of it. And I think it'd be really important both for Patrick and everybody that's here from Boulder and all the other communities served by Xcel to hear your thinking on that question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, Leslie. That is effectively what we're doing. We are, when we get a slice of the Xcel system, we get a slice of the renewable concentration on that system, so that as they get greener, so do we. In fact, we stand on their shoulders as a wholesale power supplier. They provide us with the base. They also provide us with the balancing resources. And so we're very much supportive of their efforts to move to clean energy. Our communities want to move there faster. And we are fortunate enough to have a contract relationship with them that allows us to develop our own projects in addition to pulling power off of their raw power supply on the grid. And so we're executing on that with all of the investments that we've talked about making, developing projects of our own, taking on new projects by contract, the RFP solicitation that Steve has described. And it's very much an attempt to accelerate this clean energy transition at a pace and a scale that matters to our community. And I would suggest that when you look at the evolution of the tri-state contracts and how the tri-state is working with its member cooperatives to provide more flexibility. I've seen something similar in North Carolina where the distribution cooperative and the transmission and generation cooperative are working collaboratively on projects that are local in origin, but provide benefits to the entire system. My hope is that all of us, regardless of how we're shaped as utilities, engage our communities and work with them to help them meet their needs. And if, Boulder and other Xcel served communities are happy with the pace that Xcel's on, great. You don't have to do a thing, right? But if you're in our community and you want to be there, yesterday, and you're getting your board members and your community leaders and your large employers, Vail's Epic Promise, Aspen Skiing Company, saying, hey, come on, Holy Cross, get with the program, which was sort of what I encountered when I first started in 2017. And, we did the utility thing and just, folded our arms. Oh, we don't do that. We do it only for everybody, right? And now I think we've pivoted where the Aspen School District calls us up and says, we're thinking about going net zero. Can you help us? And we're like, yep, we're on it. I think that's the kind of relationship that we all need to develop in our utility community partnerships.
Thank you.
Helping your customers, what a concept.
Yeah.
But thank you. I think that was a super helpful response, and we'll be talking to you about your contract.
By the way, Ron, you are spot on. There are economic benefits of doing it locally. A lot of the projects that Steve talked about are being done with local suppliers. They're fostering job creation and retention in our community. We are actually, in many ways, we're buying resources from our members when we buy rooftop solar and we buy behind the meter storage. Those funds stay in our community. So yeah, that's a super good point. I'm glad you brought that up in the chat.
Another one about RTO. Colorado's transmission costs are very low right now. when we look at existing RTOs, most have higher transmission costs. Don't we lose control of transmission costs by joining an RTO?
Steve,
Yeah, I can take that. You know,
he's the expert.
well, it's funny. I'm not sure who said Colorado has low costs, but in Colorado, there are many different footprints, each with different transmission costs. That's the way the grid works today, where somebody who wants to access the grid, they have to pay the toll road to use the transmission system of each individual owner whose wires they rely on. So today in a talk that I gave this morning, I gave the example from Glenwood Springs to Delta as the crow flies in Colorado is maybe a distance of about 50 miles. I don't know, 50, 60 miles. But if I were to build a generator in Delta or contract with a developer who was building a generator there, I would have to pay 3 different toll roads to access that energy. I'd have to pay roughly $5 a megawatt hour to Tri-State, roughly $5 a megawatt hour to Western Area Power Administration, and I have my local transmission system embedded cost of roughly $5 a megawatt hour. Well, I could figure that the delivery freight charge for that 60-mile delivery would be in the range of $15 a megawatt hour. That's nearing the whole energy production cost from that resource, doubling my effective price. In RTO markets, there has been an increase in transmission investment. Take a look at SPP and MISO, and you'll see that the regional transmission planning process has resulted in significant grid upgrades in both those regions. But the thing is, for efficient resource development, now the people who have a duty to supply their electric customers, their access options are no longer paying all of these individual toll roads, having individual negotiations with each of those transmission providers. If I had a customer for electricity in the panhandle of Texas, and I wanted to build a wind farm in North Dakota in the Southwest Power Pool, I could do that for a single grid access fee today. And I'd go to one transmission provider in order to make those arrangements. That's a significantly less complicated and significantly more efficient access technique than each of these pancaked transmission toll road rates stacked on top of each other by independent grid providers today. Hope that answers the question.
And yes, and thank you. A great question and a great example for us. Just again, many people listening know that $15 a megawatt is 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour. But for those that don't, we want to make sure. And what Steve was saying is that the generation might be 1.5, I think, give or take, cents a kilowatt hour. So you're doubling the cost by having to pay all these tolls by using all these different transmission systems. Again, sort of a layperson translation. But Steve, that's a fabulous example. And I think a lot of us will be happy to, you know, kind of stand on your shoulders and use that. Thank you.
Got a couple of questions here about batteries. How do you keep up with the changing battery technology in terms of amortization of initial investment? And what happens to old batteries? And another one is related to how do you anticipate the use of batteries and demand flexibility when you're creating your resource plan?
Steve, why don't you take that second one? I'll get the first one and simply say that batteries have typically about a 10 to 15 year lifetime. So they're relatively short-lived in the world of utility assets. And as you know, batteries are used for both automotive and transport purposes, as well as for stationary storage. And the batteries that are in electric vehicles really have a much shorter lifetime than a stationary battery because of the way in which it's powering the vehicle, lots of starts and stops and what have you. So you can take a battery out of an electric vehicle and put it into a container, a shipping container at a substation and extend its life and really have a longer term asset than you might first otherwise think. That being said, NREL and a number of the national labs and universities are working really hard on battery recycling. which I would argue we not only need battery recycling, we need solar panel recycling, we need wind turbine recycling. We need recycling for all of these emerging technologies in order to close the loop for true sustainability. And I would encourage those of you who are starting careers or you got students that are getting into this field, that's the place to be, because at some point we're going to need to close that life cycle. And recycling, recovering the rare earth minerals and the other things that go into today's technologies is going to be super important for keeping costs low and keeping things out of landfills.
Thanks, Brian. I'll take part 2 on that, which is our use of batteries and evaluation of their contributions in the resource plan. I'd started out by saying batteries can't get too cheap too fast. The sooner the costs come down on batteries, I think the sooner you'll see kind of a fundamental revolution in the utility industry. Bear in mind that if we can get batteries cheap enough as their price point comes down, then storage can become an alternative to expansion of the grid. So there were these questions earlier about, the RTO can drive up transmission costs potentially. And, I mentioned that we've seen increased investment, but also increased efficiency. But an alternative to grids is storage. If I can spread out the use of my transmission lines and flatten it away from peak demand situations through strategic location of storage, then I've increased the efficiency and have an alternative to that. A person could look at grid capacity costs and try and make a business evaluation of where that price point is. I can't answer that question right now. But to go into some of the details that we do anticipate in our resource plan, we are expecting that we will make, in reliance on our road to 100, use of distributed storage, both on our utility distribution voltage lines and that our members choose to install, but also to share that capability with us. And just to do a tangent for a second, I did notice as I was trying to scroll through the chats, there was a question about what if we wear out the batteries that our members install. And I do want to give some reassurances. We have taken that into account. We have contracts that address the cycling impacts of the batteries. So we're not just trying to run roughshod over unsuspecting retail electricity customers or anything like that. I don't know if I answered your question. I got kind of off in la la land there.
I think you answered it and more. It was very helpful. Here's a
Chris, I just want to be a little bit mindful. Brian and Steve have both worked a long day. We know that Steve was testifying at the commission. So I'm wondering if we should maybe just give the audience an indication that we've got a couple more questions, something like Brian and Steve, do you want to weigh in on, we don't want to keep you here all night. We do want to keep you here all night, but we also want you to get rested up so you can get this work done. So
Leslie, I'll say I'm game for as long as you are. This is an important part of what we see our role in leading this responsible transition to clean energy is to, tell our story and share our experiences, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise. And so, to the extent there's still some interest, I'll stick around for a while.
When Holy Cross reaches 100% clean energy, how many gigawatt hours are from Xcel Energy and how many are from Holy Cross owned or controlled generation?
So I answered this one privately in the chat, but I'll share my answer to everybody. I think it depends on whether Xcel Energy and we can agree on a 100% power supply product that they can provide to us as a wholesale customer. 100% means 100%, right? And so to the extent that if we are going to achieve our 100% clean energy goals, then anybody that we're taking power supply from, whether it's Xcel or any other provider or any other project, it's got to be 100% clean. And so the answer to that question is really, how does our relationship with Xcel evolve over time? We would love to stay partners with them. We've had a great partnership these many years, and we do a lot of things together. And from fire mitigation to transmission planning to program development and exchange to, so it would be great. But ultimately, when our community says they want 100% clean, we got to go and get it for them. And And if we can't do it with Excel, then, you know, unfortunately we'll have to work with some other folks or do it ourselves.
Here's a related question that I think is not really a question, but words of appreciation is, why can't we choose to subscribe to Holy Cross instead of Excel?
So, but there is one that I don't think I've read the whole thing, and I'm pretty sure it's from Alan Best. And he talks about that there, you know, there's some discussion of pumped hydro and also of green hydrogen. And I don't know that I'm going to find it again. Could you expand your thoughts on these two types of storage, both the, let's call it green hydrogen and pumped storage hydro? Especially regarding pump storage, do you see opportunity? Oh, now I've lost it.
You see, especially regarding pump storage, do you see opportunity within your service territory?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Steve speak to that. We certainly have we have a lot of vertical diversity that we can explore in our territory, which I think would be useful. But I think this question from Alan really focuses around long duration, large amount of storage. And I will put a pin in that and say that that's the one part of the clean energy transition that I don't think anybody's got solved yet. Pump storage, hydro, compressed air energy storage, conversion of excess renewable energy to hydrogen through using that electricity to crack apart water and separate the hydrogen and the oxygen out. These are all really good technologies that are in the development phase, or in some cases commercial, that I think are going to be part of our toolkit for getting to 100% renewables. We're going to need storage that is small in scale and short duration. We're going to need storage that is large duration and large in scale. And I think that to the extent those become available and competitive at prices that we're willing to pay, and they're given their credit for providing backup capacity to support integration of renewables, then they'll be part of our resource mix going forward.
Very good. And Chris, I think I'm going to jump in with one that is kind of derived from a little bit of the conversation in the chat. Some people that are attending, I think, have a pretty good sense about an RTO because we've read and, you know, listened to webinars and things like that. But because Colorado has not been part of a regional transmission organization, I think there's, you know, maybe a third or a half of the audience that doesn't have much a clue at all, except for they've tried to piece together. And I'm wondering if between you could try to do the RTO, like how can you think about it if you've never heard of an RTO before tonight? How might someone think about that? Is it happening in other places in our country? Those really basic questions.
That's a tough one because they're such a complicated animal. I think you could compare it to maybe, I don't know, I'm making this up as I go, so you got to give me the hook and rein me in if I go off course here. But I'm thinking of the Old West. You know, every town might have had an individual bank of its own. There was no banking reserve system. The highways between the towns were pretty rough and dangerous. You know, and an RTO is a regulatory structure established through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that helps address those, you know, the reliability of those town level banks through a better backup system with respect to resource adequacy and generating reserve margins, and helps make the roads safer between the towns by improving access to and use of the electric grid so that those banks can back each other up. I mean, that's analogies are bad. Okay.
No, I
But
like it. I like it a
that's an
lot,
off
but
the cuff way.
I'm going to
looking at-
keep you going again. You know, for some people on the call, they know this, but I want to make sure we help everybody kind of come along. So, are there RTOs in the United States? Do they work? Has it been a good thing? You know, pretend like, yeah, we don't know anything here.
Okay, I can give you my opinion on that. There are, let's see if I can list them all. ISO New England is an RTO. State of New York is an RTO. The largest RTO in the country was originally called the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland footprint, and now they've just changed their name to PJM and no longer make reference to those states because they're a lot bigger than that now. And they're the largest RTO in the country in the Appalachian footprint primarily, but all the way to the East Coast and west into Illinois. There's the Mid-Continent ISO, Canadian border down to Louisiana. There's the Southwest Power Pool, Canadian border to the Texas Panhandle and eastern New Mexico. And then there's the California ISO, which in the state of California is a regional transmission organization. Each of them have a different evolutionary path and an interesting history. Somebody should write a book sometime about that because there's a lot of stories. The upshot is they all got to a similar regulatory status at FERC by different means. So the origins may be different, but the intention is at the federal level to address reasonably effective wholesale supply competition and efficient development and planning of the transmission grids in interstate commerce.
That's so super incredibly helpful, you know, just in a sense, giving us that mental map. So if we follow what you said, Steve, if I'm out on the East Coast, most of that's in some kind of an RTO. There's several of them, PJM and Northeast and New York and yada, yada. And then I come and then there's MISO, Midwestern with Minnesota and some states like that. Then Southwest Power Pool. Now we're talking Kansas, Nebraska, places like that. And then I happen to be interested in a state called Colorado, but you jumped over us. And the next thing I know, you're talking about California. So what's with that, sir? You know that I'm playing as straight man, right? Obviously.
Right. I love how you can summarize it, Leslie. You know, maybe the way to do is talk about the parts of the country that aren't in an RTO. You have the Deep South, which has I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but observers might note that there's a dominant incumbent investor-owned utility in the Deep South. That may have something to do with the lack of an RTO in that area, but I'm only expressing a conjecture. And then you have large portions of the Western interconnection, which are trying, Leslie, they're trying. You know, I've had the satisfaction, you know, things move at utility speed, which is somewhere around the pace of a glacier in the utility world. And in the West, since 2008, there have been discussions about expanding regional markets in these Western states, including Colorado. And if you look at what has developed now, counting those utilities that are in the CAISO's imbalance market and those that have committed to the SPP Western imbalance market, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'd guess it's somewhere of only about 15% of the electric demand in the Western states that hasn't made at least a commitment to a regional market. So we're getting there.
But again, those regional markets that you just mentioned, where the CalISO, and I always forget which one is one, EIM, one's an EIM, one's an EIS, but CalISO has an energy imbalance market and Southwest Power Pool has an energy, which is kind of like a baby version of doing some of these regulatory benefits that you talked about. But as you said earlier, it's much harder to do the big RTO thing, but the benefits get a lot bigger too, and the kind of costs you can save. So if you have not heard about RTOs and EIMs and all of that, well, just, you know, sleep on it tonight. You can Google it. There's more than a few studies about them. And there is a lot of testimony at the Utilities Commission. There will be a lot more. So if this is your first night, just count it like you're going to be hearing a lot of this going forward. And Steve is one, I don't know, I think you're probably one of the nation's experts, but I certainly know that you're one of Colorado's experts. So thank you, Steve.
Thanks for the kind words, Leslie. I just see a question here about RTO and unpancaking transmission rates, and I wonder if I could just jump on that real quick. The question is, doesn't Excel and the other joint dispatch participants unpancake transmission rates without an RTO? I would answer that no, they don't. The reason being, they don't make the grid available for assured use. The joint dispatch agreement lets them share capacity with each other, but does not address any of the resource development access issues that would be provided for under an RTO. So just wanted to jump on that since I saw it there. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
No,
Hey,
of course,
Steve,
that's,
hey, Steve, not to lead you further, but what about the EIM, EIS? If you're just doing imbalance trading, that doesn't do anything for unpancaking rates either.
You're exactly right, Brian. And just in a conceptual way, the imbalance markets address transmission access the same way the Xcel Energy Joint Dispatch Agreement does. It only makes available a short-term, non-firm access to the grid and doesn't provide you any of the contract assurances that you need in order to develop new renewable resources.
And that's the big difference.
yeah, thank you. I hope that was super helpful. Now, there is an awful lot more to know, but at least you're not, the folks that weren't aware weren't. Bryan, when you came on in 2017, I think is when you started at Holy Cross, left NREL, went out in what we might call the real world to see if we could really get this stuff done.
Yeah.
Holy Cross, I remember because of all the work on the Pueblo Unit 3, the Comanche 3 coal plant, they were like, yeah, coal's the best thing and we're going to burn coal and real utilities burn coal. We're a real utility and we're super happy to be part of that coal plant. You had a high percentage of coal. And here, just three and a half, 4 years later, you have a utility and a set of communities that are like, as long as you keep it affordable, we want to go fast along the decarbonization path. And I don't know what you feel comfortable talking about in public around that, but I'm curious about what your observations are about that transformation in your territory and also internally to Holy Cross itself, your staff and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, Leslie, that's a great question. And obviously we were involved prior to the 2012 online data of Comanche 3. It had been in development in the works for years and years before that. And those of you that were paying attention to energy markets in the late 2000s, you know that the price of natural gas was several times more than what it is today. And the price for renewables at that point was also several tens of times more. I mean, it's been amazing how quickly those renewable resources, wind and solar in particular, have gotten so much more cost effective. Now, granted, there's still federal and state subsidies associated with it, but unsubsidized, they're competing with natural gas and with coal, even before you factor in the greenhouse gas emissions these days. 10 years ago, that wasn't the issue. That wasn't a possibility. So as a utility, when you were looking for a lowest cost power supply, you were invariably drawn to coal. And you can understand why in the mid 2000s, without thinking ahead 10 years, 20 years to the climate crisis that we face, you would have done the cost-effective thing to keep your rates low, and you would have invested in a new, more efficient, technology-based coal plant. I think the lesson here is that we should be careful not to get ourselves into these really long-term fixed arrangements with which we have no flexibility to adapt to a changing world. And even when we look at our existing and future agreements, we're looking at things that are 10 and 15 and maybe 20, but we're not looking at the 30 or 40 or 50-year arrangements that used to be commonplace in the utility sector because the world changes a lot in the span of a decade or two. And I think it's only going to change even faster as the technologies move forward. So I don't, begrudge the decisions that were made. They were made at the right time in the right instance. What I know is those decisions are no longer relevant and fit for purpose in today's marketplace and with today's community. And so we have to look at changing our business practices, our business model, our sources of supply, and yes, our company culture to really think about what this transition to a clean energy future entails. Tonight, Steve and I have only talked about power supply. That is one of many facets of change that a utility faces. We need to retool our workforce. We need to plan our system better. We need to change our business model and our rate design, which, by the way, you guys want to go for a day, we can talk rate design until the cows come home. You know, right now we make a living by selling kilowatt hours, and yet here we are saying, well, we're not going to sell as many kilowatt hours because we're going to invest in energy efficiency, and we're going to invest in generating power in our own communities at points where people use it instead of buying it from us. So there's a lot of change going on in the utility sector, and I'll be a little bit of a defender here and say, you know, I know the advocates are like, we want all of it and we want it yesterday. And that's incredibly hard to do when you're trying to get hundreds, if not thousands of employees to literally upend everything that they've been trained and they've grown up on as to the industry, the way that we've done it for the last 100 years. To get to turn that on a dime is a huge leadership and cultural challenge in any organization, let alone one that still has to focus on keeping the lights on from day in and day out and doing it safely. And the fact that we're able to do it as fast as we are doing it at Holy Cross and at Excel and at Black Hills and all throughout the state of Colorado, compare us to other states. It is really remarkable how fast things are changing here. And it's something that I hope advocates will applaud more than you criticize. You know, we want to get there too. And we frankly need your help to get there in a way which keeps us still standing at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, all of these technologies, as good as they are alone, they are much better when they're tied to an electric grid. And we're still going to be required as utilities to keep that grid up and running for the good of society. So soapbox mode off, but thank you, Leslie, for letting me do.
That's why I asked you the question, obviously. And then it seems to me like you must have made a lot of progress, and we'll get Steve in a second. You must have made a lot of progress internally in order to be able to kind of be aligned along these ways. And is that true? Do you feel like most of your staff are like on board with this, or is there internal, like, why aren't we still just burning coal? Because that's what we used to do.
There's still quite a bit of that, frankly, in the culture. It's not as much as there was last year or the year before. And I think the fact that we're able to show already through Steve and his team's efforts that we've made a transition towards clean energy, and it's actually not just keeping our power supply costs flat, but it's actually saving us money on the power supply side, which is about half of what our consumers pay on their bill. That's allowing us to make investments in grid modernization, in fire protection, in new programs and new services without having raised rates at all on anyone since 2018. And we're going to hold them flat again in 2021. And as Steve knows, we've got a good line of sight on doing it again in 2022. And that's before even some of these projects that he's described that have lower price points than what we're currently paying in the market. It's before those projects come on and give us additional savings. So I think when you say you indeed can have it all, you can have reliable power, safe power, portable power, and clean, what's not to like?
Yeah,
Brian,
thank you.
can I just supplement that with one other observation too on this issue of the perceptions around particularly coal as necessary for electric reliability? Because you know, I don't know if the people participating in this discussion are aware that Comanche 3 as a coal plant was unavailable almost the entire year of 2020. It was out of service. It had failure problems. And you know, just like there are the concerns about a variable supply from wind and solar, there's the need to back up any resource that produces on the electric grid. And I just wanted to add one other point with respect to communities that support electricity through coal mining and operation of coal plants, because for them, you know, this transition issue is personal and scary and a quality of life impact to them. And, you know, that issue of transitioning those communities, it poses a big set of challenges that I think everybody should recognize and have some sympathy towards. Fortunately, like Bryan pointed out, those issues are no longer, that stuff is more expensive, and yet you're promoting it and shutting my community down. That stuff is now cheaper. You know, I remember back in the days when energy produced from a wind farm was 15 cents a kilowatt hour, and from a solar farm was 25 cents a kilowatt hour. And now you might see that at 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour from wind and 2.5 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour from solar. And what that does is it has the effect of making these resources economically advantageous to coal and gas in most cases. And so I think the thing that those communities who are confronted with an economic transition, like happens in communities over time everywhere, that they should recognize as an inherent advantage that they have is that connectedness to the grid that originated from those coal resources. And as those shut down, look at and promote the opportunities to develop replacement resources that can preserve jobs in their communities and take advantage of the existing grid access opportunities that are there. I don't know if everybody here has had a chance to drive around that Comanche coal plant in Pueblo, Colorado. But if you ever do, it's an interesting thing. You'll notice it's completely surrounded by solar panels. And what's happening there, that plant, those solar panels are taking advantage of the grid infrastructure that exists there to produce more cheaply onto the grid. So just wanted to make an observation about that too.
Yeah, and I think I might follow up on the coal is not really actually reliable for a whole bunch of reasons. I was down in Pueblo when they were having a lot of problems bringing the plant up in 2010, and they're having a lot of noise problems. And I was down there to try to experience what it was like for the folks in Pueblo who were having really serious health problems. And I was basically leaning on the fence to the plant when it went down. It went, and within a minute, it went. And back then in 2010, I've never told this story in public before. I was scared out of my living wits because I'd been opposing this plant, and here I was within less than half of a mile of the plant when it went down. I had nothing to do with that, but I was scared. Plus, it's pretty impressive when a 750 megawatt resource goes offline in less than a minute. And if you read, as I do, all the files around all the times Pueblo Unit 3 has been offline since it came on in 2010, it's done that a lot. I have only been there that one time, but it's, wind and solar come and go, but it's true with other plants also. So it's a big challenge you guys are doing, and we're so grateful to that. I think there are more questions that we didn't get. How much energy does Guzman broker for you at this time? And are they brokering 100% renewables? Are they regulated like a typical utility? Kind of help us understand a little bit about Guzman, your relationship.
Brian gave a good answer to that in the chat box. I don't know if you saw it.
Oh, I see. Oh, good. Well, I guess good. Well, maybe we'll call that good.
I've got one here. It's to what extent is the example of Holy Cross replicable in other co-ops or more broadly to utilities, including investor-owned utilities? What advantages do you have that others may not have, or disadvantages?
Right. So that's a great question. I saw that from our friend Alan Best, and we've had that conversation in the past. I'll share it with the group. We talk about this being a journey to the summit for 100%. And with a lot of mountain climbs, there's several different routes to the summit. And I think that no matter which route you take, you always find that the climbers carry the same sort of gear. They carry their ropes, they carry their ladders, they carry their ice axes if they're climbing in the Himalaya, And I think what we're doing is we're showing how the climbing tools of the trade can be used for our particular ascent to our particular summit. Your route to the summit or your own may vary. Your definition of the summit may vary if you're a utility. And I respect the need for other utilities to say, we've got to take longer to unwind some of the circumstances that we're in. We've got different circumstances, different communities, different considerations. We own assets that we need to exit with all respect to a just transition. We've got a workforce that needs to transition. So I think the tools that we're using are definitely applicable. And we regularly share and compare examples. And by the way, Holy Cross learns from some of the tools that other people are using. Our investments in solar plus storage in Steve's RFP that he described. We were watching what the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative in Hawaii and Hawaii Electric were doing with solar and storage and how they were integrating. I've actually seen them dispatch a solar plus storage plant to ramp up its production as the midday sun dies down over other parts of an island. And it's just like a gas peaker. And I was like, ooh, I want one of those. That's cool. So we do that and we share and compare our tools, but our journeys are going to be different and they're going to take different routes. They're going to take different times. And I just hope that people will learn from our journey and take what they can and use it to meet their community's goals and needs.
Mm-hmm. And I might thank you so much, Bryan, for that really thoughtful answer. I might add that the way I look at it again from an outsider is that Holy Cross has been in a bit of a unique position. They get their electricity from Xcel, but they're not under a franchise with Xcel the way, for example, Boulder, Westminster, Lafayette, or Louisville, or Denver are. So they don't have those franchise constraints. And they're also not under the contract, the whole full requirements contract with Tri-State. So, and then they've got some pretty fantastic personnel and some pretty fantastic communities and some, their bigger customers. And you've been able to get all those aligned so that you're in this position to help not just us, but utilities all over the country begin to believe we can get there. We don't know, maybe we can only get 98 or whatever it ends up being. But if we just do the headlight thing, let's get from where we are to the next 3 to 5% renewables. Let's keep doing that as fast as we can. And I think we'll be surprised at what, good old Yankee ingenuity and all that good stuff. We've got all these great minds working on storage and grid integration and all that. So I have an endless set of questions, but I think we have maybe exhausted even the inexhaustible Holy Cross team. But you guys want to say anything in closing for us?
Well, just to Ken's last question, I would refer you to Steve's commentary this morning at the Commissioner Information Meeting, where he talked a lot about what we learned with the Vibrant Clean Energy Study on market options for Colorado. That study is now in the record of that proceeding. And I would just encourage you to go to the PUC website, dial that up when it's available, because that will be the seminar course in all of that, Ken. And I'm sure Steve would be happy to talk to you more about it.
And I think those Vibrant Clean Energy studies are also available on the Vibrant Clean Energy website.
That's correct.
There are quite a few that relate specifically to Colorado, and they are just, it's in silico. It's not like what you guys are doing in the real world, but they're a huge help, I think, as we try to think about these options going forward.
I will say the one big headline, and it was something that Steve and I actually disagreed about when we could convene the study. I told him that I thought that doing a Colorado only RTO type simulation would show benefits. And he's like, it's not worth it. And we need bigger markets, and he was right. Bigger markets are better, but a Colorado only JDA, joint dispatch agreement, integration of transmission, common planning, you're reducing those pancakes. Even if we just did that within the confines of the state, that would be much better than where we're headed right now. So that's a little nugget I'll share with you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Steve, any kind of closing thoughts for us?
No, just thanks for, not pelting me with rotten vegetables and for enduring my voice this whole time. I appreciate it.
Oh, Steve, you're wonderful. And we would never pelt you. We're super grateful. And I'll be honest, I think we'd love to have you back about a year from now. And there are people from all over Colorado that have, I think, learned a lot tonight. There's so many thank yous in the chat. I won't make you commit to it tonight, but we really hope we could kind of get a regular update where we have time for some more of these detailed kind of questions. You've both been great. Explanations have been great. And, your positive outlook is huge and very, very much appreciated. So no one has sort of unmuted themselves and jumped in. So I think we're just going to do what Chris has done, which is to thank you both very, very much. Hope to see you like in person when we get back to that. And we'll be in touch in some number of, within a month or, not a month, within about 8 or 9 or 10 months to see if we can get another update.
We appreciate it, Leslie. Thanks everybody for your time this evening and for your interest. And let's go get on this journey to 100 together.
We're ready. So thank you guys so very much. It was really a wonderful evening.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.